Lexical Semantics in Semantic SEO. Today I'm joined with Pavel Klimakov, and we're going to go through all the different NIMs, and there's a lot of them, and some completely confuse me, but some, when I do start to learn them, actually now are starting to help my prompting to be so much better with artificial intelligence. So I want to kick off with starting by saying, with regards to the different NIMs, why is it important, in your opinion, for anyone that wants to improve their semantic SEO to understand the different NIMs?
Sure. So hyponyms, hypernyms, and meronyms. These three would be the main things, let's say, to focus or pay attention to. These things are primarily attached to Corai's framework and Corai's teaching for the main use of, let's say, optimizing or tweaking the overall representation of the content. This actually applies to all three levels, which is the topical map, the briefs, and then the actual content that is being written. What these things are in nature is it allows you to take a kind of word or an object, let's say, focus on it as a central piece, and then kind of dissect it or split it and realize what are other things that are either similar or closely related. What this allows you is you're gathering very tightly interconnected concepts. And for the most part, if you provide your answers, if you make your, let's say, contents, like the briefs, the overall planning of the topical map, if it considers these elements at all steps, your representation will be way more interconnected. And the key word here is everything becomes much more densely represented. There's less chance to kind of go all over the place and start to be vague about how you provide the information, the things you talk about. And what basically the opposite happens. You start to be more compact, more condensed, and that means there's a much higher chance for you to provide more value with more words, which is one of the key components for lower cost of retrieval. You're saying more with less words.
Which is obviously a very important part with regards to semantic SEO, the cost of information retrieval. With regards to the NIMs, I'm going to give you an example, and I don't think you'll like this example because this is very old school TF-IDF type, BM25 algorithm type things, where I started to use within AI prompting acronyms. So like SEO for search engine optimization and stuff like that. And where I used acronyms was in certain industries that we do lead generation for, I wanted to know all the acronyms related to that industry. So it could have been like insurances or compliance, legislation. And what it started to do is it started to open up certain things to me that I was like, I've never even heard of this acronym. And then it made me, when I was like, this is very relevant, or it could be like CHAS and stuff like that, which is to do with health and construction, health and safety and stuff like that. And there were certain acronyms that I'd never heard of, which I was able to get onto the page, and actually started to realize that with like query expansion or query augmentation or whatever you want to call it, I started to rank for more keywords because people were searching for that acronym with the products or services that we did. So, but I wouldn't have known how to say it without saying, give me all the acronyms to this industry. So that is one of the NIMs that I've been using with regards to prompting. Right? Can you give an example where someone might use the Meronyms, the Hypernyms, or the Hyponyms in a way of being able to prompt AI to make the content more dense, like there's more information in there in less words, but you've got all these important kind of characteristics of what's needed?
Sure. So let's say in a case where there's a writer that's already working with a brief, usually what they do have is a kind of heading or a question that they need to process. In some certain cases, they might have scenarios where additional, let's say, words, hints, numbers, statistics, or other elements are already introduced. they know that these elements will be a part of the answer. Typically, if we're asking like how much does this insurance cost, or what's the point of like this thing versus that thing, the thing itself is already in the question. So that's kind of the primary focus. From here, if let's say it's a bad scenario where the writer doesn't know the industry, but they're still writing the answers, not a great case, but then they can go to, let's say, any kind of AI and start to ask, what are the specific, let's say, meronyms of this specific term? Here comes a little bit, let's say, tricky part though, because for all of these nyms, basically there are programmatic like packages or pieces of a code that have already all of this like dictionary aligned with each other, that you can basically search a specific word and identify what are these like meronyms of this word. Meronyms, by the way, basically are just a parts of the thing. So if you're talking about a computer will have a processor and then a memory and things like that. Or if you have a football team, then there's players and the coach and etc. So that's the logic there. So in a scenario where a person that who is not educated but they somehow need to be sounding smart and provide good enough answers, this is a kind of quick hack. You can ask an LLM to give you these meronyms to provide within the answer. The only problematic case is that, as I mentioned, the more like let's say realistic use for these things would be done programmatically. If let's say a kind of system wants to check if such meronyms or if such words are present. If you're going to ask an LLM, it is most likely to kind of give you the general direction, which might be overlapping with that basically data set, or let's say those programmatically preset things. The main idea here is that this is just a hint for what are the right things to say. And in a scenario, let's say if you're dealing with a topical map, let's say you're working things out and you gathered some concepts, maybe you realize this might not be covering all of the things. You can take the other two components, which is hypernyms and hyponyms. Over here, you can think of it in a like slightly simpler way. Hypernym, it moves the concept upwards, meaning it groups something. So if we take, let's say, a word or let's say a concept like France, which is a country, what is a group of that? That is countries, right? So from the word France to word countries, you have this connection. And if you go for a hyponym, this is the basically opposite direction. You go from a group of countries towards something smaller, or let's say fruits and let's say apple or banana. So that's the kind of direction. The most important idea here is that it just allows you to think about whatever is in front of you in a slightly different way. It's kind of like a trick or a kind of quick tool that, oh wait, maybe I forgot about that, so let me think about this thing. By the way, just as like a complete side note, but I think I saw somewhere some long time ago, there was like a YouTube video or something like this, like if you forgot what if you run out of things to say in a conversation or something like this, it's like remember the last thing and then think that you can generalize it, go more specific, or like connect it to the other similar concept, something like that. So this is just a kind of hint how to be unstuck in a case where you're not really well educated. But this is not really a kind of I don't know, like a hack or some kind of a secret weapon or something like that.
What's interesting, and the reason why I wanted to do this episode with you, right? I'm because I always get muddled up between the hypernyms, the hypernyms, the meronyms, and stuff like that. So I explained on the acronyms of how I use that, and I've just got it up now. Where we use meronyms, right? I'm probably saying that wrong, but meronyms of let's say we do wet paw surfacing, which is a rubber surface on a playground, right? And where I do meronyms is in the section usually to do with price. And what we're normally doing is we're then trying to get all the meronyms of how that affects the overall price. And sometimes it brings something back that says, oh, okay, now we can give what is the cost of wet paw. The cost of wet paw is, and then give a figure underneath it, what influences the cost, and then we're getting all the different elements that make up what wet paw is and how that influences the price element. That's where we use the meronyms. This is just for us at a page level. The hyponyms is more like the different types, so like types of playground surfacing and stuff like that. The hypernyms, which kind of, like you said, goes up one group, that's where normally we're trying to do, okay, it goes up a group into the next thing, but what else is in that group that we might be able to do comparisons against? So that versus this. Did you see that then? So we can use that for then the comparisons. So that's where, but without using the words like hypernyms, hyponyms, meronyms, I feel like it's by using them words now, and the team have been prompted when they're writing content, okay, in this section, try to find out how this might influence that, or in this section, look at the hypernyms for if there's any comparisons that we could do in the article. It might end up being in the micro content, or it could end up being like on a third party source where we can do James Dooley versus Pavel Klimakov or whatever it's going to be, and we can do a comparison that link back through to our site saying James Dooley is far superior to Pavel Klimakov because blah 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 blah, and then we're able to do like brand jacking and stuff like that, and that's where some of it is. And there's one last one, and I think I got this from yourself. I'm pretty certain I did, the antonyms, and we're obsessed now with antonyms for when we're doing a review page. All of our reviews used to be very positive sentiment, and I feel like with AI, if it's too positive, they don't like it, and it almost needs to have a part of it that says, here's not, if you're doing pros, you need to have a cons section, but you try to make the cons section not that bad if you're obviously looking to sell. But we also use it for query fan out terms on third party, like, so we would write articles about, let's say I've got a brand called James Dooley, I would do an article for James Dooley alternatives, or why should I not use James Dooley? But then in the article, I'd frame it as being, you do want to use James Dooley. So I'm turning the antonym into a positive and framing and controlling everything back to what I do. So that's how we're using it in real life businesses. Obviously, you're using the nyms in a different way. Do you use the antonyms in anything for a semantic content network, a topical map, or content briefs?
Sure. So I want to comment on a few points that you mentioned.
Yeah.
The antonyms is actually a very, very powerful thing, and I learned this through Koray, through his very, very, very old videos that were like 4 or 5 years ago or something like that. This just seems to be the overall kind of decision that Google took on at some point, and they are just stuck to it. But basically they always put, okay, I don't want to say always, but like really almost always, they want to put the opposite next to each other. So if you're looking for the benefits of something, they want to give you the risks next to it all the time. And I do think this has to do with this like safety, kind of like neutralizing the answer that they're providing to not misdirect anyone who's searching. So, you know, if you're, let's say, searching for like some medical benefits of a specific pill, but there's side effects, they have to say that this is not just a good thing. You need to be aware of the whole picture, which is why I don't think they want to kind of dissect the pluses from the negatives. They want to always bring them together. And then when it comes to things like reviews, I can say that they did some kind of study from, I don't remember which research paper, but from many months ago. They were just checking reviews, I believe from Amazon. And what they found there is quite easy to identify like fakely generated reviews. They follow certain like principles and patterns, but for the most part, if you take like one account who spreads reviews would be overly positive, but the real review is almost never positive, or it can be, but from the same user for all products, that's practically impossible. So there are these kinds of patterns. So what they do see is that if you something that would sound more realistic or more fair, when you have here's the good but here's not so good, or here's a bit of a neutral, or these kinds of things, that's basically things that become a little bit more like believable. And also I want to mention, related to these let's say meronyms, hyponyms, the way you explained how you, let's say, try to process the pricing. The important part in all of this is that it's really so much more about understanding the user, because if they're asking like a generic question, like let's say I need to paint all the walls in this apartment, how much is that gonna cost? But the real price becomes like the square meters, right? Or the overall amount of work that needs to be done. Probably the type of paint, plus if some other additional things need to be done, like if we have to remove furniture or additional stuff. So these become kind of contexts that start to affect the price. In certain niches or industries, you realize that these kinds of like going down and splitting everything by meronyms actually gives you a much better representation, because all of these components start to strongly affect the price. But also think about it from the perspective of just overall, let's say, like education and let's say providing a kind of answers. I'll give a, let's say, quick example here. Imagine you are searching, or somebody is asking for a question like, there is, let's say, Mount Everest, and like, how long does it take to climb Mount Everest? But now the real scenario now depends how well trained you are, at what time of the year you go. Are you going with a big group? Are you going by yourself or with a guide? Are you trying to go as fast as possible, or are you just like enjoying the views? How much food you bring with yourself? So all of these elements start to actually change the final answer. The factual, final, accurate answer depends on these elements. So if things like, let's say, splitting the concept into meronyms help you identify more of these concepts, that's generally most likely will be more useful. But a much more powerful element than this is to actually rely on your users, let's say their queries, their behaviors, and if you have direct communications with the clients, you will actually know directly and precisely what are these things that are bothering them. And that's exactly what needs to be addressed as you're providing this information. That's the main logic. So going back to the concept of all these NIMs, it's just a kind of assistant, like a trick, how you can try to identify those. But if you already have better sources, like direct communication with the customers, actually use that instead of kind of being stuck on this level. But of course, use as much of this stuff as you can.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sometimes it's just, it brings, what we found, like in real life examples, is when we speak to a business owner and we try to get as much information as we can out of them, they don't give us all the information. They give us what they think is all the information. And then when we use certain NIMs with prompts, we then ask the client, what's this? Oh yeah, that's really important because of X, Y, and Z. Well, why don't you tell us? And then what starts to happen, it helps prompt questions to them that we would never have known about. Even acronyms, like the same thing with that. Like it just says, what does this mean? And he goes, oh, it just means that, and that. Is that important? If you were selling that, is that important? Yeah, it's really important because of this, this, and this. And we're like, well, you never told us that. Yeah, I know. And then literally this goes on and on and on until, and it's trying to extract that information from a client, but be able to prompt them in a way to get the information.
Yeah, right. I probably should have mentioned that when I'm saying this, I'm, let's say, remembering one of the specific cases in my mind, which I probably should have mentioned by myself, that if I'm dealing with, let's say, a kind of SaaS company, usually they have like a ticket service. And if they have a proper like sales setup, they're also recording all of the sales. So if you go to both of these parts, the support ticket area, if you see what people are for what features they're asking or what things they have problems with, that's that thing. And if you go into sales pitches and sales recordings and you realize that over there are questions, like technical questions, not like, oh, but this is expensive, or, can you do it cheaper? Not that stuff specifically, but, oh, but, but we have the specific material, or but we have that other specific condition. Those are the elements that I'm talking about. So if you have these things somehow documented somewhere with the companies you work with, that's the gold mine, that specific thing. Because you're right, asking directly from people, in the moment, they will not have it at the top of their mind. It just sits somewhere deeper, and it's hard to kind of bring it up.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone who's watching this, we hope you like the episode and going through all the different NIMs with lexical semantics. Pavel, it's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise. Thank you, James.